Can you hear me? I don't know, something is wrong.
Why?
Oh, we're live on YouTube. The anti-Semites must have taken a break. Okay. Let me just share this on let me let a few more people in. Good evening, Jane. Good evening, Levita. Good evening. Oh, more people are coming. Hang on tight. We're letting everyone in. We're going to share this on two more Facebook pages, and then we will get going. Got to share with the whole world. This is where it's at. The Torah emanates from Bozeman. It is, but Facebook, there's different pages on Facebook. So there's Jewish.tv where it's broadcast, and Chabad of Montana, and Chaim Brook, and then we'll be good to go. One day, people, I'm going to have a tech. Wherever I go is going to be a photographer and a tech person. One more moment here. They're not doing that job. I can hire someone local to be tech support. They don't have to be Jewish or a rabbi. Okay, we're done sharing, and we are ready to really start sharing the thing that, let me let some more people in here. Very good. We are a couple days away from Shavuos, one of the three major festivals in Jewish life. The three major festivals, of course, are Passover, Pesach, Shavuos, which is the one coming up next week, and Sukkot. And for whatever reason, Shavuos got a bad rap in the sense that in America, more Jews know about the holiday of Hanukkah and the holiday of Purim than they know about this incredible biblical holiday of Shavuos. And perhaps, as the Talmud says, without Shavuos, Kama Yosef Ika B'Shuka. Rabbi Yosef said, without the Torah being given at Sinai and Shavuos, there's a lot of Yosefs in the marketplace, meaning it wouldn't make me unique. What makes a Jewish person unique was the fact that there was Shavuos, there was a giving of the Torah. And so it's sort of, for many Jews, it's underwhelming, but really it's the day. Passover allowed us to become a nation, but the completion of nationhood took place not when we left Egypt, but when 50 days after Egypt, we arrived at Sinai and received the Torah. And specifically today's Rosh Chodesh, and in Montana, if you're in Montana, we still have like 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours left till for Rosh Chodesh, because the sun never sets around here. And so I understand if you're on the East Coast, it's already nightfall, but over here it's still Rosh Chodesh when we usher in the month of Sivan. And now we have these 5.5 days left until we're going to usher in Shavuos on Sunday night. And Shavuos will be on Monday. In Israel, it'll be on Monday. Outside of Israel, it'll be Monday and Tuesday. We'll read the Ten Commandments on Monday. There'll be services again on Tuesday with Yizkor for our loved ones' memorial service. But I want to begin with just a general idea of what these prep days. They are very much starting from today, and I'll explain why soon. Starting from today is considered time that we prepare ourselves for Shavuos. So studying before a Jewish holiday, halacha always says, Shloishim Yoim Koydem Achag. 30 days before a Jewish holidays, when you start prepping yourself with study and knowledge and halacha of knowing how to celebrate that holiday when it comes 30 days later. So 30 days before Sukkot, which is the middle of Elul, 30 days before Pesach, which is the day after Purim, and Shavuos technically 30 days before Shavuos, which is Vav Iyar, right in the beginning of the month of Iyar. Someone sent a comment. Let me just make sure it's not related to the class. Oh, not related to the class. Okay. The 30 days before Shavuos, but according to some, with Shavuos, because it's only a 2-day holiday, you don't have to worry about 30 days, a couple days before you should prep yourself. So much so that some of the Hasidic masters say that when it says in Ethics of Our Fathers in Pirkei Avot, it says, which is a general lesson in life. Before whom will you have to eventually give before whom will you eventually have to reconcile, give a full report of your life. Now, generally, that's referring to when you go to heaven after 120 years, you're going to get a full reconciliation and a full judgment based on your behavior. But the truth is, the name me, the word me, which normally means in front of who, me means who. The word me in Hebrew is 2 letters, mem yud, which has a numerical value. Mem is 40, yud is 10. And so the Hasidic masters say that you have to remember that on the day of the giving of the Torah, on day 50, after counting the Omer for 49 days, on day 50, you're going to have to give a reconciliation, because it's such a great day, the holiday of Shavuos, that you're going to be in the state of, you're going to have to explain for yourself, are you ready for the Torah to be given to you, or are you not? Did you prep yourself? Did you take it seriously? Or you just showed up to get sushi, cheesecake, and 10 commandments, and we're good? Or did you really take the prep time to prepare yourself for the giving of the Torah in the most serious way? So let's talk about the days themselves for a moment. What I mean by that is, let's talk about the historical days. What happened today on the 1st of Sivan all the way to the giving of the Torah? So if you open up the Talmud, in the tractate of Shabbos, if you want to know exactly, it's on page 86b. It says that on the Rosh Chodesh Sivan, which is today, the Jewish people arrived at Sinai. That's when they arrived at the mountain. Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Har, the Jewish people dwell right in front of the mountain, before the mountain, and it says it in the singular because they were united as one entity. There was ultimate oneness when they stood at Sinai. When was that? That was today, the 1st of Sivan. Tomorrow, the 2nd day of Sivan, is called Yom HaMeyuchas, the auspicious day, because that is the day in which Moses told the Jewish people on behalf of God that the Jewish people will be Mamlechas Kohen and V'goy Kadosh. They will be a priestly kingdom, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. The selection where God selected the Jewish people as being so-called the chosen nation. I know the modern day blood libelists and anti-Semites on Twitter are not going to like it, but too bad. On the 2nd day of Sivan, God chose the Jewish people to be his ambassadors to the world, to be his representatives to the world, to be the shining bright and illumination of the world. That was tomorrow, the 2nd of Sivan. On the 3rd day of Sivan, which this year is going to be on Friday, Moses commanded the Jewish people to begin the prep time. The boundaries we put into place. It's called Agbola. You're not allowed to go near the mountain. You have to watch where you're going. There's different areas. The 70 elders can go here. Moses can go there. The regular Israelites can go there. Then came the 4th day of Sivan. The 4th day of Sivan was the day where there was Prisha, which is Moses commanded the Jewish people that the husbands and wives have to separate for purity. No intimacy during those days. It's not a time to be focused on materialism and physical intimacy, as important as it may be. You have to separate because we're going to get closer to the giving of the Torah. On the 5th day of Sivan, which this year will be Sunday, which is Erev Shavuos, the day before, Moses built an altar, which again, you can read the verses for that. He built an altar and he brought a sacrifice on that altar. And of course, on the 6th day, which was Shavuos, the Jewish people said, we accept what you tell us, and then we'll figure out the details. And God came down in Sinai, and the 2 first commandments were given by God directly. The final 8 were given through Moses, because the Jewish people couldn't handle it. It was the giving of the Torah. So here, now you know the trajectory. Now you know why these days prior to Shavuos, especially the last 3 days, are till today called Shloishes Yemei Hagbala, the 3 days of limitation, because we limit our obsession and our indulgence and our involvement with physicality and materialism, and we prep ourselves psychologically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually for Monday, when God is going to give us the Torah for the 3,300 and whatever, it's 40 years or so that he's giving us the Torah. But there's a very interesting statement in the Talmud that we need to address and we need to explain, and we're going to do that tonight. This explanation, this question and answer, this discussion, which is vital for our own spiritual journey, is a discussion that the Rebbe of blessed memory shared on the Shabbos before Shavuos in 1983. So we call that in the year 2 CE, the second year in Chaim's era, 2 years after I was born. In 1983, the Rebbe addressed this topic, and I'm going to read to you straight from the Talmud first. So I said earlier that on the first day of Sivan, they arrived at Sinai, right? So the Talmud says as follows. And according to most, that day was either Sunday or Monday. So he says on the Sunday, Moses did not report anything to the people. They got to the mountain, they settled down, but there was no speeches, there was no sermons. Talmud says, why? Because of exhaustion from the journey. Right? Look at that. Such a nice little Talmudic statement. On the second day, Moses told them they're chosen. On the third day, he told them to limitations. And the fourth day, he told them to separate from their wives and their husbands. And the fifth day, he built an altar. There was action on every other day. But on the first day, they arrived at Sinai. So some 45 days after leaving Egypt, silence. No speeches, no sermons, no instructions. Go to sleep, take a nap, have a good night, and we'll talk tomorrow. Why? Because they are tired from the journey. So here the Rebbe has a little bit of fun. I don't think people sitting at the Farbrengen saw it as fun, but as I read it, I could see the Rebbe enjoying tearing apart this Talmudic statement and trying to understand its depth and then rebuilding it to understand really what the Talmud is trying to say. So if you're a typical Jew sitting in the yeshiva and you read this statement in the Talmud, you think, okay, the Jews were tired. How beautiful. Judaism allows for people to chill when they're tired, and we'll get back to business tomorrow. But the Rebbe says that's a problem. Because if you study Hasidic philosophy and you study Musar, you study Jewish history, it's clear that from the minute the Jews left Egypt, they were on fire to get the Torah. They had escaped by a thread. They escaped the 49. They were in the 49th level of impurity, and there's only 50. Had they reached level 50 of impurity, they would have been toast. They would have never been able to be redeemed. God, in his infinite kindness, took them out from a country that was impossible to be taken out of, away from Pharaoh. 7 days later, they went through the sea with incredible miracles, and if they were counting up. They knew that on day 50, that's why we count the Omer, because on day 50, they were counting for when they're finally going to get to Sinai and reach this pinnacle moment where they're going to get the Torah. Human nature, says the Rebbe, is that when we're excited about something, when we're awaiting something, when we're counting up for something, we don't wait and get closer and closer and then say, you know what, I'm too tired, I'm not excited anymore, I'm going to take a nap. So you see, they finally arrived to Mount Sinai, knowing that this is going to be the mountain on which they're going to receive the greatest gift humanity has ever received. Something they've been waiting for, something they've been yearning for, something they've been counting for. And we're going to arrive at the mountain. And Moses says, you know what? Everyone seems really tired here. The bodies seem very weak. Let's take a day to relax, and then we'll get back to business. So from an emotional, spiritual perspective, something's off. But even more than that, says the Rebbe. Let's talk practically. The last journey they made from the area called Refidim to Mount Sinai was a very short journey. It wasn't some long journey. It was in the Sinai desert. They went from here to there, chick-chack. Furthermore, it's not like they were schlepping like, you think of Fiddler on the Roof when Tevye has to leave Anatevka. You think that's how it looked like. That's not what it looked like. They had clouds of glory evening out the ground for them. There was no hills. There was no animals bothering them. There was no snakes and no scorpions. They were being protected and shielded and traveling miraculously with the clouds of glory. So it wasn't so tiring in itself. Also, it was Sunday. Or maybe Monday, but it was the beginning of the week, which means they just came off from Shabbos. They already had a bunch of rest. So basically, the Rebbe does not accept that when it says in the Gemara, when it says in the Talmud, that they were tired because they were schlepping and it was a long journey, it doesn't make sense emotionally, spiritually. It doesn't even make sense practically. So the Rebbe, in his novel interpretation, says as follows. That when it says they were tired from the journey, we assume it means tired physically. It says no. They were spiritually tired. What does that mean? Just like physically, when you walk a lot and when you make a lot of changes and like exercise, it affects you and you get tired. Spiritually, when you're making a lot of changes in a short amount of time, it can have a major effect on you. Exhaustion, internal exhaustion. And everything they've done from the minute they left Egypt till they arrived at Sinai was all about change, right? They were counting. But every location that they stopped at, it says when they arrived at Sinai, they were all one. They were all united. And then Rashi says, quoting from the Medrash, that in all their other stops along the way, there was quarreling. We assume quarreling means they were fighting. They weren't one. And then they arrived at Sinai and they found unity. But the Rebbe says, no, why would you assume they were fighting at every location? So what does it mean fighting? They were discussing and debating and having heated conversations about the spirituality that they were now finding in their journey. And they finally arrived at Har Sinai. They had already reached this sort of spiritual pinnacle that they got. And they parked themselves there and they had oneness, but the oneness came after an incredible amount of inner change that they were seeking to find within themselves. And whether they succeeded or not 100% is debatable, because we know after the giving of the Torah, just a few weeks later, they ended up with the sin of the golden calf, which means that no matter how hard you're working internally, if you're trying to do it in a very short amount of time, it doesn't necessarily stick. But no one could question that the Jews, during those 45 days until they arrived at Sinai, in those final 5 days before the giving of the Torah, they were spiritually exhausted, because every place they went and every moment they had was to debate and to discuss and to seek and to find spiritual meaning and spiritual satisfaction and spiritual understanding. And by the time they arrived at this one entity at Sinai, they were, as the Rebbe said in Yiddish, a große Ausgemattertkeit, super exhaustion. So when it says in the Gemara that Moses didn't speak to the people that day because they were exhausted from the journey, it's true. It just doesn't mean physically. It means they were exhausted from the spiritual journey of arriving at Sinai. And once they had that day where there was no more spiritual instructions, so therefore there was no more spiritual exhaustion, they had a day to sort of internalize, oh my gosh, we reached the place, we're here. For the next 4 days was just practical of how we're going to make sure we're ready for the giving of the Torah. But the Rebbe in this talk takes it a step up, a step further. And he says that we need to assess the Torah in general, right? Because what was the whole point of the giving of the Torah at Sinai? It was the revelation of God with the giving of the Torah. But when you study Torah, there's two aspects to it. And I'm going to use terms, I've never heard this. I mean, I'm sure there's other rabbis that have used these terms, but I was studying it earlier today. And the best that I can come up with is separating it between the wisdom of Torah and the infinity of Torah. What do I mean by that? There's the wisdom of Torah, which means God took his essence, God's wisdom, which by definition is infinite, but he enclosed it in practical laws and with practical limitations, right? That the human brain, for the most part, can seem to comprehend. So you study the laws of a mikvah, and as holy as a mikvah may be, it still needs to be a certain measurement. It has to be 40 sa'ah. Whatever, how many gallons that is of water, you can't just make a mikvah with a bathtub. You have to build it according to the halachic, the limitations that God puts within that system. You could be very, very modern and you want to have pink tefillin, but God said they should be black. You could want to write your Torah scroll on recycled paper that came from Portland, where they're busy recycling a whole day, but God said, do it on parchment. In other words, the Torah is divine, but it's divine embedded into a wisdom that each of us gets to understand and comprehend based on our abilities and based on our toil that we put into the study of Torah. But then there's a higher level of Torah, which is the essence of Torah, which is when it says in the Zohar, in the great book of Jewish mysticism, it says, God and his Torah are one. And just like no one could really understand God, because God is infinite, so too there's a level to the wisdom of God that the human brain cannot comprehend. It's super rational. You can try to justify it and make it make sense, but there's a part of it that is just infinite. Now, there was Torah before the giving of the Torah. Our patriarchs, the Jews in Egypt, the Levites, they had access to Torah, but they had access to the understand, to the human component of Torah. When did the infinite part of the Torah, the infinity that's embedded in Torah, come to fruition? That was at Sinai. So the giving of the Torah at Sinai was not just something physical, right? Oh, we got a Torah that gives us laws, right? That's why people say, oh, that's when we got the Old Testament. What does that sound like? We got a bunch of laws. It's true. We did get laws that are meant to be studied and internalized and toiled over. And in yeshivas around the world, that's what happens 24 hours a day. But what also happened at Sinai was that God revealed himself in a way that he's never revealed himself before and will never reveal himself again until Mashiach comes. So therefore, there was two layers in preparation for the Torah. There's the part where you prepare yourself for the wisdom, right? To be a vessel for the wisdom of Torah. And for that, you need to know where your place is. There's rules. Don't go here. Don't go there. Separate from your spouse. We're going to bring an offering. Those are the practical things we are doing so that we can be good receptacles. We can be good receivers for the wisdom of God that's embedded in the Torah. But what about the higher thing that takes place at Sinai? The greater thing that takes place at Sinai, which is the revelation of God, where God comes on the mountain and says, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. God reveals himself at Sinai. How are you preparing for that? By separating from your spouse, by bringing an offering, by going to the mikveh. For those that didn't have a circumcision, getting a bris. Yes, those are all great ways to prepare for the wisdom. How do you prepare for the infinite? You prepare for the infinite with silence, with no speeches, with no sermons. Moshe Rabbeinu understood that he needs to help the Jewish people prepare. He needs to help the Jewish people prepare for the infinite. How do you prepare for the infinite? With something that we call in Hasidic terminology, bittul. By not being. To prepare for the wisdom of Torah, you have to be a certain way. You have to prepare a certain way. And if you're preparing a certain way, then you have to be in order to prepare. But to prepare for the infinite, to prepare for the incredible revelation that's going to take place at Sinai, for that you need to not be. How do you not be? Silence. No talking, no speeches, no instructions. Just allow yourself to sit at Sinai and ponder the fact in silence that this is about what God is going to reveal to me. It's not about what I do or don't do. It's all about God. God-centric. When you're transcending yourself, it's not about me. Even spiritually, it's not about me. It's just about God. So when Moshe says, you guys traveled so much. Yes, you had a great spiritual journey to get to Sinai. So you're exhausted from that. Now what we're going to do is that we're going to let that sink in. You're weak, you're tired, you're spiritually exhausted. Let's be silent. Let's recognize that in order to get the infinite revelation that we're going to get at this moment on the 6th of Sivan at Shavuos, we need to not be a little bit. And it's hard. We all are self-indulgent. We have self-preservation ideologies that we have to live by. We're self-centered, self-aggrandizement. Even spiritual people, by the way, it's called spiritual selfishness, or spiritual arrogance. I prepared for Sinai and I prepared. How about Shah? No, you're not involved here. There's silence. Shtika, silence. Va'atem tacharishon, like God said to Moses right before the splitting of the sea. Now is a time not for prayer. Now is a time just do what you need to do. Here God is saying, let's reach the inner silence, the inner part of us that is not, and make it all about Hashem, because we're going to need to be in that state of spirituality in order to receive the greatest revelation that humanity has ever received, which is at the giving of the Torah. So when Moshe Rabbeinu decided that the first day at Sinai should be a day of silence, it wasn't because they were just exhausted from traveling. He wasn't so nice. It was because they were spiritually, they reached the point where they finally could take a day to prepare themselves through silence, through being God-centric, and realizing that when you get that level of revelation, your own issues don't play out in this situation. And I think that's an invaluable lesson as we prepare ourselves now in the next few days for Shavuos. Right? Shavuos is not, the rabbi's making sushi and cheesecake. It's not about the sushi and cheesecake. We can all love sushi and cheesecake. This is Matan Torah. Zman Matan Torah. We say it's the day that God gave us a Torah. It's the day that made us worthy of the title Jew. It's the day that we became a holy nation and a kingdom of priests. It's the day that we became ambassadors to the world to bring the infinite into a finite world. The chaleres. You know what chaleres are? There's no translation. People that have chalaria, you know chalaria? Cholera, what do they call it in English? The disease. The hilarious of the world think that if they scream about us, that we're this or that we're that, somehow they're going to get rid of us. They don't understand that they're trying to fight the infinite. And sometimes Jews don't understand that we are the infinite, that we have this bond with the infinite that allows us to shine in ways that the finite can never do. There's wonderful people all over the world. There's a world full of good, godly people that want to have a civil society, that understand goodness over evil, that understand God and want God in their life. They are not the infinite ambassadors. They are not the ambassadors of the infinite. A Jewish person, starting from Rosh Chodesh Sivan until the giving of the Torah, were chosen by God to be the conduits and the ambassadors of the infinite. And when Jews recognize that and they live up to that ambassadorship, and we go out into the world and say, Tyre mentioned, my dear people of the world, I want to share with you a message from the infinite. And then share with them the 7 Noahide laws, share with them how to be a good member of society, share with them how to bring light into the world. Then the world is receptive. You know when the world is not receptive? When Jews show up like there's some Nebuch, oi, me, the poor Jew, I'm such a victim. There's so much hatred. My army is bigger than your army. It's not about your army. It's not about the finite. Sure, you need a good army. You also need to have good food in your refrigerator and nice clothing to wear and a nice house to live in. That's all finite stuff. What makes us unique is that we have tapped in from Sinai going forward. We have tapped in not only to the wisdom of God, but to the infinity of God, to the essence of God. And we were chosen to be his ambassadors, not for building hospitals. I have a secret to tell you. Christians and Muslims and Buddhists and atheists can build hospitals too. Many of them do. For example, all the hospitals in Saudi Arabia are not built by Jews. So what makes Jews unique is not that we build hospitals and not that we're good in, we're knockers in Washington, or we can make this accord. That's not what makes us unique. It's not even the wisdom of the Torah that makes us unique. That does make us unique, but what really makes us unique and what really needs to be celebrated on Shavuos and what really needs to be prepped before Shavuos is the infinity of who we are. We are not limited by any of this. Jake Tapper did say or didn't say. The press secretary did say we're for Hamas or against Iran, is America. All of that is shtusim. You know what that means? It's idiocy. For the next 50 years, or the next 50 seconds until Mashiach comes, we're going to be talking about Iran. So why do you need to talk about it? What does it matter? You don't control Iran. I don't control Iran. Trump doesn't control Iran. Bibi doesn't control Iran. The Eibishter controls how the world operates. And even if there's human things that have to be done, it's not by me and you. You know what we can do? Ambassadors of the infinity. Who are you? What do you represent? What are you bringing to the world? A political opinion? I don't have I have political opinions, everyone does, but it's not based on some super knowledge that I have better than someone else. I read the same fakakta news like everyone else, and I came up with an opinion. But that's not what makes me unique. Every yo-yo has an opinion. As they say in Yiddish, I said it the other day, Kaila machen kenakatza, even kittens have opinions. That doesn't make you unique. Shavuos made us unique. Without Shavuos, there wouldn't be Sukkot, and there wouldn't be Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and there certainly wouldn't be Hanukkah and Purim. Shavuos is the day of all days. It's the pinnacle, the completion of the Exodus from Egypt. Without Sinai, what would we be? Kama yoisedika b'shuka. Good people. Ask Mick. In Dillon, there's beautiful Gentiles that build hospitals, and they're not Jewish. But do you know what a Gentile can do? As nice and good and wonderful, they can't put on tefillin. Or they could, but they wouldn't be infusing the world with holiness. We can infuse the world with holiness. We must infuse the world with infinity. And when we do, there's no one and nothing that can get in the way. They can make little obstacles, but they can never stop the infinity, because there's no way a finite entity can compete with infinity. And therefore, there's no way a finite ambassador of whatever they're an ambassador of can ever affect an ambassador of the infinite. And so tonight, as the sun sets from Rosh Chodesh Sivan, the day that we were sitting as one at Sinai, as one nation under God, truly indivisible, was at Sinai. That was the last time we were indivisible. But then tonight starts the second of Sivan. Tonight, you need to comprehend and internalize. Tonight's the night that God said, you are going to be for me a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. And then Friday is going to be the day that God said, let's create boundaries. And on Shabbos is going to be the day that God said, separate from your spouse. Stop indulging in physicality, take a break so you can be more spiritual. And on Sunday, we're going to bring an offering, and Monday, then you'll come in and you welcome Shavuos like a Yid, because you recognize the incredible holiness and uniqueness and how auspicious it really is as a day. So that when you stand here in Shul and you say in the Amidah, the Musaf and the regular Amidah, that it's Man Matan Teiraseinu, it's the day that our Torah was given to us. It's not going to be some euphemism. It's not going to be some little, it's going to mean it in your heart and soul. You're going to have Chulsha de Urcha. You're going to have your own exhaustion from the journey, because you're going to be through such a spiritual, exhausting journey to get to Sinai, to get to that moment, until we merit again the time when we will see a revelation like we saw back then with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, our righteous Mashiach, when it says Torah Chadasha Me'iti Teitze, the Mashiach will teach humanity a deeper dimension, a deeper mystical dimension of the Torah. V'mheira v'yameinu, amen. Have a rockin' rest of the week. Have a wonderful Shabbos. I look forward, if you're in Bozeman, to see you on Monday in Shul, and on Tuesday in Shul. Have a Freilich and Shavuos. I think next Wednesday night, which is not Yom Tov, so we should have regular class Wednesday night. So if you don't hear from me otherwise, we'll see you back here next Wednesday for a Gazette's the class, B'Karev, Mama.